The Galactic Council Chamber floated in the void between stars. It was a massive structure, built by species that had mastered space travel before humans learned to make fire. Inside, representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their designated sections. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had feathers or skin or something else entirely. But they all followed the same rules. For 10,000 years, the Council had kept peace across the galaxy. Wars were things from ancient history. When disputes happened, species talked, they negotiated, they signed agreements. Violence was considered primitive and unnecessary. Humans were the newest members of this grand alliance. 50 years ago, a galactic scout ship had detected radio signals from Earth. First contact had been cautious but peaceful. Humanity had been welcomed into the Council, though many species watched them carefully. Humans had a reputation. Their own history was filled with wars and conflict. Some council members wondered if these aggressive primates would ever truly fit in. But humans had surprised everyone. They followed every rule. They were polite in negotiations. They never threatened anyone. After 50 years, most species had relaxed. The humans were harmless, they decided. Perhaps all those stories about human violence were exaggerated. Ambassador Chen represented humanity in the council. She was a small woman with gray hair and patient eyes. She spent her days in endless meetings, discussing trade routes and resource sharing. It was boring work, but she did it with dedication. Today was supposed to be another routine session. The session was about shipping lanes near the outer rim. The Vrin Concordat, a powerful alliance of reptilian species, controlled many of the major routes. Recently, human merchant ships had begun using some of these routes. The Vrin were not happy about this. They considered those routes their territory even though council law said space belonged to everyone. Ambassador Chen was explaining Earth's position when her assistant rushed into the chamber. The young man's face was pale. He whispered something in Chen's ear. The ambassador's expression changed. Her patient eyes became cold and hard. She stood up slowly and looked around the chamber. Every species had stopped talking. They could sense something was wrong. Chen spoke. In a quiet voice that somehow carried across the massive room, she announced that a human civilian transport ship called the Merchant's Hope had been destroyed. 3,000 people were dead. All of them were colonists traveling to a new world. There were families on that ship. Children. They were not soldiers or politicians. They were ordinary people looking for a new home. The Vrin representative, a tall creature with green scales named Scareth, stood up. He started to speak, but Chen raised her hand. She was not finished. She explained that the Merchant's Hope had been intercepted by Vrin military vessels. The human captain had tried to comply with their orders, but there had been some kind of translation error. The Vrin ships had opened fire. The transport had no weapons, no shields strong enough to matter. It had been destroyed in seconds. There were no survivors. The council chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted questions. Some demanded explanations. Others called for calm. Through it all, Ambassador Chen stood silently, her face showing no emotion. The council chairman, an ancient energy being named Threnody, called for order. Threnody had founded the council thousands of years ago. Its voice resonated in every mind present, cutting through the chaos. It announced an emergency session. The Vrin Concordat would explain what happened. Scareth returned to the podium. He looked nervous now. He explained that the attack was unauthorized. A junior commander had misunderstood orders. The commander had been told to discourage human ships from using Vrin routes. He had interpreted this as permission to use force. It was a terrible mistake. The Vrin government was shocked and horrified by what happened. Scareth announced that the Vrin Concordat took full responsibility. They would execute the commander who gave the order. They would pay reparations to the families of the victims. They would sign new agreements to prevent this from ever happening again. The Vrin leadership offered their deepest apologies to humanity. The council members nodded. This was the standard response. It followed all the protocols. Mistakes happened, even after 10,000 years of peace. What mattered was making things right afterward. Many representatives looked at Ambassador Chen, expecting her to accept the apology and begin negotiations over the reparations. Chen walked to the central podium. She looked at each council member in turn. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet and very cold. She said only one thing. Humanity required 72 hours to formulate a response. Then she walked out of the chamber. Her entire delegation followed her. The council watched them leave in silence. After the humans left, the chamber filled with relieved chatter. The crisis was over. 72 hours was more than enough time to work out the details of compensation. The humans were following protocol. They were being reasonable. Some representatives even praised Chen for her restraint. Scareth stood with a group of Vryn officials. They were discussing the reparations they would offer. One suggested a payment of 10 million credits per victim. Another proposed building a memorial on Earth. They wanted to show the council that the Vryn were responsible members who took their mistakes seriously. Only Threnody remained silent. The ancient being had witnessed thousands of species join the council. It had seen wars end and peace begin. It had watched civilizations rise and fall, and it had studied humanity carefully over the past 50 years. Threnody had read human history. It knew about their wars. It understood that humans had only stopped fighting each other when they joined the council. The violence had not disappeared. It had just been hidden away, like a weapon stored in a closet. Now someone had killed 3,000 humans, not in battle but in an act of casual cruelty. A mistake, Scareth had called it, but that would not matter to humanity. What mattered was that their people were dead. Threnody watched the council members celebrate their diplomatic success. It said nothing. There was no point in warning them. They would learn soon enough. The humans had not asked for 72 hours to negotiate. They had asked for 72 hours to prepare. Across human space, quiet signals began to transmit. Ships that had been labeled as civilian transport started moving toward assembly points. Mining stations in deep space powered up reactors that were far too large for simple mining operations. Orbital facilities that supposedly built commercial satellites began launching something else entirely. The galaxy was about to discover that humans had been very good at following the Council's rules. They had been peaceful and cooperative and friendly, but they had also been preparing, because humans knew something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten after 10,000 years of peace. Peace is only possible when good people are willing to fight for it, and humanity's patience had just run out. The first 12 hours after Ambassador Chen left the council chamber were quiet. Too quiet. Human merchant ships across the galaxy suddenly changed their routes. They all began moving back toward human space, every single one. The council's monitoring stations noticed this but assumed it was a mourning period, humans pulling back to grieve their dead. By hour 24, something else started happening. Human diplomatic missions on various worlds began packing up. Not permanently, they said, just temporarily, until the situation was resolved. Their smiles were polite. Their words were careful, but they were leaving, fast. At hour 36, the galaxy's long-range sensors detected unusual activity in human space. Massive energy signatures, power readings that did not match any known human facilities. The Council's military analysts looked at the data and frowned. They sent requests to Earth asking what was happening. The messages went unanswered. At hour 48, the truth began to emerge. A Catharn Empire scout ship was passing through a system at the edge of human territory. The Catharn were an insectoid species known for their military expertise. They had some of the best warships in the galaxy. Their scout captain was experienced and confident. She had seen every type of military installation the galaxy had to offer. What she saw in that human system made her freeze in disbelief. The facility was labeled on galactic charts as a commercial shipyard, a place where humans built cargo vessels and passenger transports. The captain had passed through this system several times before. She remembered seeing construction frames and civilian ships. Now those same construction frames were surrounded by warships. Hundreds of them. They were not being built. They had been hidden, stored in orbital facilities that looked like warehouses. The frames had been a disguise. The entire shipyard had been a disguise. The Catharn captain ordered her ship to full stealth and ran deep scans. The warships were advanced, very advanced. They had weapons systems she did not recognize. Their armor was denser than standard military-grade materials. Their power cores generated more energy than should have been possible for ships their size. She transmitted her findings back to Catharn High Command. Then she jumped to the next human system, and the next, and the next. Each one told the same story. Mining stations were actually weapons platforms. Research facilities were actually strategic command centers. Civilian colonies had military bases hidden beneath their surface structures. By hour 60, the Catharn captain had counted over 15,000 combat vessels. And she had only surveyed 5 systems. Humanity controlled 12 systems. If the pattern held, they might have 30,000 ships or more. The Catharn Empire's entire fleet numbered 8,000 vessels, and that was considered one of the largest military forces in the galaxy. The captain transmitted one final message. 3 words that would change everything. The humans lied. News spread across the council within hours. Emergency sessions were called. Military analysts from 24 species reviewed the data. Some refused to believe it. Others began pulling up human records, looking for clues they had missed. Those massive power readings humans said were fusion reactors. Actually, antimatter containment systems. The mining stations that supposedly processed asteroids. They were manufacturing ammunition and weapons. The civilian population Earth reported as 20 billion. Probably closer to 300 billion, spread across hidden colonies the Council knew nothing about. The humans had been hiding their true strength for 50 years. Every treaty they signed, every inspection they allowed, every report they filed, had been carefully designed to show the galaxy exactly what humanity wanted them to see. And the galaxy had believed it because it fit their expectations. Humans were newcomers, primitive apes. They could not possibly be a threat. At hour 68, the Council received a transmission from Earth. It was broadcast on all frequencies, sent to every member world simultaneously. The message was simple and direct. Admiral Sarah Voss appeared on screens across the galaxy. Admiral Voss was an older woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen combat. She wore a black uniform with no decoration except a single insignia on her collar. Behind her, through the window of her ship, hundreds of vessels were visible. All of them were warships. All of them were moving. She spoke without emotion or theatrics. For 50 years, she said, humanity had followed the Council's rules. Humans had been patient. They had been peaceful. They had been cooperative. They did this because they wanted to belong to something greater than themselves. They believed in the Council's promise of peace and prosperity for all species. 3,000 humans were now dead. Not soldiers who had chosen to fight. Not politicians who understood the risks of their position. Families, workers, children. People who believed in the Council's promise. People who thought they were safe. They had been killed by the Vryn Concordat. The Vryn had apologized and offered compensation. But money could not bring back the dead. Apologies could not undo what was done. The Council's standard procedure was not enough. Not this time. Admiral Voss announced humanity's demands. The Vryn Concordat had 48 hours to surrender. Not their military, not their territory, just the people responsible. Commander Scareth, who had given the order to fire. Every officer in his chain of command who had approved the action. Every member of the Vryn government who had issued the vague directive that Scareth misinterpreted. If these individuals were not surrendered, humanity would come and take them. The Vryn military would not stop this from happening. The Council would not stop this from happening. Nothing would stop this from happening. This was not a negotiation. This was not a request. This was a statement of fact. The transmission ended. The galaxy sat in stunned silence. Within the Vryn Concordat, chaos erupted. The ruling council met in emergency session. Some members wanted to comply with human demands. Others refused. Surrendering their own people to a foreign power was unthinkable. It violated every principle of Vryn sovereignty. It would make them look weak in front of the entire galaxy. The Vryn military leadership assured the government that they could defend their territory. Humanity might have hidden a large fleet, but the Vryn had 4,000 warships. They had defensive stations and shield generators. They had experience and training. The humans had never fought a real war. They had spent 50 years being peaceful. How dangerous could they actually be? The Vryn government made their decision. They would not surrender their people. They issued a public statement declaring that while they regretted the incident, they would not bow to human threats. Galactic law was clear. Member species could not take unilateral military action. If humanity attacked, they would be expelled from the Council and declared an outlaw civilization. The Vryn began fortifying their borders. Their fleet moved into defensive positions around their 6 major worlds. They activated their long-range sensors and prepared their weapon systems. They were ready. Other Council species watched nervously. Some supported the Vryn's legal position. The rules existed for a reason. If humanity was allowed to ignore them, chaos would return to the galaxy. Others quietly moved their ships away from Vryn territory. They did not want to be nearby when the humans arrived. The Council tried to contact Ambassador Chen. They wanted to mediate. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to find a peaceful solution. Every message was ignored. The human delegation had left Council space entirely. As the 48-hour deadline approached, the galaxy held its breath. Long-range sensors detected massive movements in human space. Fleets were assembling. Power signatures were spiking. Something was coming. In the Catharn Empire's war room, analysts ran combat simulations. They fed in all the data about human capabilities. They included estimates about human weapons and tactics. The simulations ran hundreds of scenarios. The results terrified them. In 90% of scenarios, humanity won. Not barely. Decisively. The Catharn were considered the best military strategists in the galaxy. Their simulations were accurate. If they were right about this, the Vryn were not ready for what was about to happen. The Catharn sent a private message to the Vryn leadership. They included the simulation data. They urged the Vryn to reconsider, to surrender the responsible parties, to avoid a conflict they could not win. The Vryn rejected the advice. The simulations were wrong, they said. They were based on estimates and guesses. The humans were bluffing. They had to be. The deadline arrived. The galaxy watched and waited. The humans came. The human fleet arrived without warning. One moment, the Vryn sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 200 human warships appeared at the edge of the Sheka system. Sheka was a fortress world, the strongest military installation in Vryn space. 800 Vryn warships guarded it. At the same instant, human fleets appeared at 5 other major Vryn worlds. The coordination was perfect. Every fleet arrived at exactly the same second. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. This level of precision required technology far beyond what humanity had demonstrated before. The Vryn fleet commander at Sheka opened communication channels. She expected negotiations, demands, threats. She received nothing. The human ships were silent. They simply moved into attack formation. The commander hesitated. This was actually happening. She had hoped the humans would back down. She ordered her fleet to intercept positions and powered up defensive shields. If the humans wanted war, the Vryn would give it to them. The human fleet opened fire first. What happened next shocked every species watching through quantum communication relays. The battle was supposed to take hours, maybe days. Massive fleet engagements were slow, complex affairs involving tactics and maneuvering. The Council's military experts had predicted a long struggle. The battle lasted 8 minutes. The human weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Missiles traveled at 95% of light speed. There was no time to evade them, no time to target them with point defense. They simply hit. Vryn ships exploded before they could react. When Vryn shields managed to block the missiles, the humans switched to different weapons. Torpedoes that somehow passed through shields as if they were not there. Later, analysts would learn these were antimatter warheads wrapped in quantum tunneling fields. The technology was theoretical. The humans had made it real. Railguns fired projectiles at incredible velocities. Simple metal slugs became devastating weapons when accelerated to relativistic speeds. They punched through armor like paper. The Vryn tried to return fire, but human point defense systems created zones where nothing could survive. Every missile, every torpedo, every projectile the Vryn launched was destroyed before reaching its target. The Vryn commander watched her fleet die around her. Ships that had served for decades vanished in explosions of light. She tried everything. Evasive maneuvers did nothing. The human targeting systems were too accurate. Concentrated fire on single human ships did nothing. Their shields and armor absorbed damage that should have destroyed them. In 5 minutes, half the Vryn fleet was gone. In 7 minutes, 3/4. The commander gave the order to retreat. The surviving ships tried to jump to faster-than-light speed. The humans let them go. They were not here to conquer. They were here to make a point. By minute 8, the battle was over. 800 Vryn warships had been reduced to 83. The human fleet reported 0 casualties. Not 0 deaths. 0 casualties. Not a single human ship had been damaged. The Vryn commander sat in her command chair and stared at her displays. This was not war. This was extermination. The humans could have killed every single Vryn ship. They had chosen not to. They wanted survivors who could report what happened. Similar scenarios played out at the other 5 Vryn worlds. Each battle followed the same pattern. Human fleets arrived. Vryn fleets engaged. Minutes later, the Vryn fleets were destroyed. The humans demonstrated something terrifying. They were not just strong. They were precise. When the Vryn fired their planetary defense weapons at the human ships, the humans destroyed only the weapons, not the cities nearby, not the civilian infrastructure. Just the military targets. Their accuracy was measured in centimeters at distances of thousands of kilometers. Within 2 hours of arriving, the human fleets had established orbit over all 6 major Vryn worlds. The Vryn military had effectively ceased to exist. And still, the humans had not killed a single civilian. Not one. Admiral Voss broadcast a message from orbit above the Vryn homeworld. Her ships floated in the sky above the capital city. Every Vryn citizen could look up and see them. Dark shapes against the sun. The message was simple. Humanity did not want territory. They did not want resources. They did not want to hurt innocent people. They only wanted justice. The Vryn government had 6 hours to surrender Commander Scareth and everyone in his chain of command. If this did not happen, the humans would dismantle Vryn military capability world by world, piece by piece, until nothing remained. The galaxy watched and understood what they were seeing. This was not conquest. This was prosecution. The humans were treating the Vryn like criminals, not enemies. They were executing a police action, not a war. On the Vryn homeworld, the government collapsed into chaos. Some members wanted to surrender immediately. Others argued they should fight to the last ship. Still others tried to flee to neutral territory. None of it mattered. The humans had won. Everyone knew it. 4 hours after Admiral Voss's broadcast, Commander Scareth was arrested by his own people. The Vryn military command turned him over to human forces along with 47 other officers and government officials who had been involved in the decision to attack the Merchant's Hope. The humans accepted custody of the prisoners and began to withdraw. Their fleets moved out of Vryn space as quickly as they had arrived. They left behind a species in shock and a military in ruins. The galaxy expected the humans to execute the prisoners immediately. Instead, humanity announced public trials. Every prisoner would be charged under human military law. They would have lawyers. They would have the opportunity to defend themselves. The proceedings would be broadcast across the galaxy. The trials lasted 3 weeks. Human prosecutors presented evidence methodically, recordings of communications, logs from Vryn ships, testimony from survivors. Everything was documented and verified. The defense attorneys fought hard for their clients, even though those clients had killed humans. This was humanity's way. Even enemies deserved justice. All 48 prisoners were found guilty. Commander Scareth and the 5 officers who directly ordered the attack were sentenced to death. The others received life imprisonment. The sentences were carried out according to human law, not Vryn traditions. The galaxy watched every moment of the trials. What they saw disturbed them more than the battles had. Humanity had rules of war. They had procedures and laws and judicial processes. This was not mindless vengeance. This was structured justice, and it was far more frightening than simple rage would have been. The council convened an emergency session. 23 species demanded that humanity be expelled. They had violated the most fundamental rule of the council. Member species did not wage war on each other, ever, for any reason. The punishment for such actions was clear: expulsion and isolation. 18 species remained silent during the debates. They did not defend humanity, but they did not condemn them either. They were thinking about what they had witnessed, about precision and power, about a species that could destroy fleets in minutes. 6 species actually spoke in humanity's defense. Small species, weak species, ones who had suffered injustice before and received only bureaucratic responses from the council. They understood what humanity had done. Sometimes they said quietly, "Following the rules is not enough." Ambassador Chen returned to the council chamber. She had not been invited. She simply walked in and took her place at the human delegation table. The entire chamber fell silent. They had been debating what to do about humanity. Now humanity was here to speak for itself. Chen stood and addressed the council. Her voice was calm, but her words were not. She said the council wanted to expel humanity for seeking justice. Very well, humans would accept that judgment, but the council needed to understand what their decision meant. For 50 years, humanity had hidden its strength and followed rules that allowed their people to be killed without consequence. They would not make that mistake again. Humanity was not interested in conquest. They did not want to expand beyond their borders, but they would never allow their people to be killed without response. Not now, not ever. The council could keep humanity as members or expel them. Either way, Earth would defend its own. With or without the council's approval, Chen sat down. The vote on expulsion began. Just before the final tally, the Catharn representative asked for permission to speak. She was granted it. What she said changed everything. The Catharn representative rose from her seat. She was a tall insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights. Her species had survived in the galaxy by understanding military power better than anyone else. They knew when to fight and when to retreat. Right now, she knew the council was about to make a terrible mistake. She activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Data appeared in the air, numbers and projections that everyone could see. Her voice was calm, but her message was not. The Catharn Empire had analyzed the human fleet action against the Vryn. They had run combat simulations using every piece of data available. The results were clear and terrifying. If humanity fought the combined military forces of the entire Galactic Council, humanity had a 60% chance of victory. The chamber erupted in protest. This could not be true. 1 species against 47? Impossible. But the Catharn representative continued. The data did not lie. Human weapons were generations ahead of galactic standard. Their coordination was flawless. Their accuracy was inhuman. And most disturbing of all, the simulations suggested that humanity was still holding back significant capabilities. The Catharn representative let the information sink in. Then she asked a simple question. What did the council think would happen if they expelled humanity? Earth would become the first power outside council control in 10,000 years. They would be free to act however they wanted. No rules, no restrictions. And they would be angry. If the council kept humanity as members, they could moderate human behavior, work with them, guide them, influence them. Expelling them would create an enemy that could destroy everything the council had built. Was that really what they wanted? The chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at the projections floating in the air. They looked at Ambassador Chen, who sat calmly at the human delegation table. They thought about warships that appeared from nowhere and battles that ended in minutes. The vote on expulsion was called. The result was close but clear. Humanity would remain in the council. But things would never be the same. The council demanded that humanity reduce its military forces to reasonable levels. Ambassador Chen politely refused. She pointed out that the council had no enforcement mechanism. Humanity would maintain whatever military they deemed necessary for their security. The council could accept this, or they could try to force compliance. Chen suggested they think carefully about which option they preferred. The council chose to accept it. In the months that followed, a strange new reality emerged. Humanity remained technically equal members of the council, But everyone knew the truth. Earth was now the strongest power in the galaxy. They just chose not to act like it most of the time. The Vryn Concordat struggled to recover. The physical damage to their military had been severe, but the psychological damage was worse. They had been one of the strongest species in the Council. Now they were diminished. Their trade agreements fell apart. Their political influence evaporated. Other species no longer feared them. Some barely respected them. Humanity did not gloat. They did not demand further concessions. They simply returned to their previous behavior. Trading, negotiating, following protocols. It was as if nothing had happened. But everyone remembered what lay beneath that peaceful exterior. 6 months after the incident, something interesting began to happen. Small species, weak species, ones who had suffered injustice in the past, began approaching human diplomats quietly, not in official meetings, in private conversations, over drinks in neutral stations. They would tell stories about wrongs done to them, pirates who attacked their ships, stronger species who bullied them in negotiations, problems that the Council's bureaucracy could not or would not solve. They never asked for help directly. That would violate Council protocol. But the message was clear. They knew humanity had power. They knew humanity had shown willingness to use that power for justice. Maybe, just maybe, humanity could help them too. The human diplomats listened. They took notes. They asked questions. Then they reported back to Earth. Earth found itself in an unusual position. For 10,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through rules and procedures. But rules only work when people follow them, and procedures only help when they lead to justice. The Council had forgotten that sometimes someone needs to enforce what is right. Earth had not wanted this role. They had wanted to be equal members, nothing more. But the galaxy had learned what humans were capable of. That knowledge changed everything. Species that suffered injustice now looked to humanity, not because humans were perfect, but because humans had shown they would act when others would not. The Merchants Guild represented 15 different species involved in interstellar trade. For decades, they had suffered losses from pirate attacks in the Outer Rim. The Council's peacekeeping forces had tried to stop the pirates but failed. The pirates were too mobile, too well organized. The Council's rules of engagement were too restrictive. Their forces could only respond to attacks, not hunt pirates down. The pirates had become bold. They attacked convoys in broad daylight. They boarded ships and took hostages. They killed anyone who resisted. Hundreds of merchants had died over the years. The Council sent condolences and promises. Nothing changed. The Merchants Guild held a secret vote. Then they sent a delegation to Earth. They were careful with their words. They did not ask for military intervention. They simply explained their problem and wondered if perhaps Earth might have suggestions. They would be willing to compensate Earth for any assistance provided. Earth's government debated the request for exactly 1 day. Then they announced the formation of the Mutual Defense Initiative. Any species could sign a treaty with humanity. In exchange for certain trade agreements and basing rights, Earth would provide military protection against pirates, raiders, and other criminal elements. This was not conquest. This was business. Security services in exchange for compensation. The Merchants Guild was the first to sign. Admiral Voss personally led a task force of 50 ships to the Outer Rim. She announced that the pirate coalition had 1 week to surrender. Any pirate who turned themselves in would be given fair trial and imprisonment. Any pirate who continued operations would be hunted down and destroyed. The pirates laughed. 50 ships? The pirate coalition had over 200 vessels scattered across the Outer Rim. They had hidden bases and secret supply routes. The Council had been trying to stop them for years. What made humans think they could do better? The pirates found out in the first week. Human ships could track quantum signatures across light years. There was no place to hide. The pirates tried to scatter. Human ships followed each group separately. They tried to fight. Human weapons destroyed them in minutes. They tried to surrender. Human ships accepted surrender and treated prisoners according to law. Operation Clean Sweep took 3 weeks. At the end, the pirate coalition had ceased to exist. Not scattered, not reduced, eliminated. Every major pirate leader was either dead or in custody. Every pirate base was destroyed. Every stolen ship was recovered and returned to its owners. During the entire operation, not a single merchant vessel was attacked. The human task force had established complete control over the Outer Rim. Then they withdrew, leaving only small patrol groups to maintain order. The galaxy watched and learned another lesson. Humanity was not just strong. They were effective. They could accomplish in weeks what the Council had failed to do in years. More species approached Earth about defense treaties. Within 6 months, 12 species had signed agreements. More were in negotiation. The Council found itself competing with Earth for influence. Some Council members resented this. Others quietly admitted it was probably for the best. Earth set up regional security offices on various worlds. They trained local defense forces. They shared some technology, though never their most advanced systems. They established communication networks that allowed rapid response to threats. They built a system within the system. The Galactic Council officially disapproved. Unofficially, many Council members used human security services themselves. It was hypocritical but practical. The humans were good at protecting people, better than the Council had been in a long time. Ambassador Chen met privately with Threnody, the ancient energy being who had founded the Council. They sat in a chamber outside normal space where only the two of them existed. Threnody spoke first. Humanity had changed everything. For 10,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through rules and agreements. The peace had been comfortable but fragile. It worked only because everyone chose to follow the rules. But when someone broke them, the system had no way to respond effectively. Chen listened and then responded. Humanity had not wanted this responsibility. They had wanted to be equal members. But the galaxy had forced them into this position. 3,000 humans died because the Council's peaceful system had no teeth. Earth would not let that happen again. What did humans want? Threnody asked. Chen's answer was simple. Humanity wanted what they always wanted, to belong to something greater. But they would do it on their own terms. They would be protectors when protection was needed. They would be enforcers when enforcement was necessary. But never again would they be victims. 2 years had passed since the destruction of the Merchant's Hope. The galaxy had settled into a new normal. The Galactic Council still existed. Its rules still applied. But everyone understood there was now an exception to those rules. An exception named humanity. Earth had not conquered anyone. They had not seized territory or demanded tribute. They had simply made it clear that certain behaviors would not be tolerated. Species that killed humans faced consequences. Species that asked humans for help received it. Species that left Earth alone were left alone in return. The Mutual Defense Initiative had grown far beyond its initial scope. 26 species had now signed treaties with humanity. Earth maintained security forces in 40 different systems. Human patrol ships had become a common sight across the galaxy. They did not interfere with local affairs. They did not impose human laws on other species. They simply provided protection and responded to threats. Some species resented this. They saw it as humanity building an empire, but those species could not deny the results. Piracy had dropped by 90% in regions with human patrols. Territorial disputes were resolved quickly when human mediators were involved. The weak were no longer helpless. The Council tried to establish its own rapid response forces to compete with Earth's efficiency. The attempt failed. The Council's forces were limited by rules of engagement and committee decisions. Human forces operated under clear chains of command and trusted their people to make quick decisions. Speed and effectiveness won. A situation developed in the Kepler cluster that would test the new balance of power. 2 species, the Dralix and the Taurans, had been in dispute over a resource-rich system for 30 years. The Council had mediated endlessly. Both sides had agreed to various compromises. None of them lasted. The Dralix were reptilian miners who had discovered the system first. The Taurans were mammalian colonists who had settled there later. Both claimed ownership. Both refused to share. The dispute had been non-violent for decades, just an endless cycle of legal claims and counterclaims. Then a Dralix mining station was destroyed. 60 workers died. The Dralix blamed the Taurans. The Taurans denied responsibility, but many did not believe them. The situation escalated quickly. Both sides mobilized their defense fleets. War seemed inevitable. The Council called emergency sessions. Diplomats worked frantically to prevent conflict. Neither side would back down. Both demanded justice. Both prepared for battle. Then something unexpected happened. Both the Dralix and the Taurans contacted Earth. Separately, secretly. Each asked for the same thing. They wanted human investigators to determine what really happened to the mining station. Both species had come to trust human fairness more than council bureaucracy. Earth agreed, but with conditions. Both sides would pull their fleets back to defensive positions. Both would accept whatever the investigation found. Both would abide by human recommendations for resolving the dispute. If either side violated these terms, they would face human intervention. The Dralics and Taurans agreed. They did not like the conditions, but they liked the alternative less. War would be devastating for both sides, and with humans potentially involved, war might be very short and very one-sided. A human investigation team arrived within 48 hours. They were not soldiers. They were specialists. Engineers, forensic experts, intelligence analysts. They examined the destroyed station carefully. They reviewed communications logs. They tracked debris patterns. They interviewed witnesses from both species. 1 week later, they announced their findings. The mining station had not been destroyed by either species. It had been sabotaged by pirates hoping to start a war between the Dralics and Taurans. While both sides were fighting, the pirates planned to move in and take the disputed system for themselves. The human team provided complete evidence. They even identified which pirate group was responsible and where their ships were currently hiding. Both the Dralics and Taurans were shocked. They had nearly gone to war over a lie. The humans made recommendations. The Dralics and Taurans should form a joint administration for the disputed system. Share resources, share profits, work together. And first, they should deal with the pirates who had tried to manipulate them. Both species agreed. Within days, a joint Dralics-Taurans military force, supported by a small human contingent, tracked down the pirate base. The pirates were captured and turned over to human custody for trial. The disputed system became a cooperative venture. A problem that had lasted 30 years was resolved in 2 weeks. The council watched this play out with mixed feelings. On one hand, the crisis was resolved peacefully. On the other hand, Earth had done in 2 weeks what the council could not do in 30 years. The council was supposed to be the galaxy's premier peacekeeping organization. Instead, more species were turning to humans first. Some council members proposed formally recognizing Earth's special status, give them an official enforcement role. Others argued this would undermine the council's authority. The debate continued for months. In the end, they decided to do nothing, which meant accepting that Earth would continue doing what they were already doing, just without official approval. Ambassador Chen attended these debates but rarely spoke. She understood the council's dilemma. They wanted Earth's help but resented needing it. They appreciated human effectiveness but feared human power. There was no easy answer. After one particularly contentious session, Threnody asked Chen to meet privately again. The ancient being wanted to understand something. Earth had become the galaxy's protector, the strongest military force, the ultimate arbiter of justice. How did humanity plan to handle this responsibility? What would prevent humans from becoming the same kind of threat they had sworn to oppose? Chen considered the question carefully. She understood what Threnody was really asking. Power corrupts. History proved this. Human history especially. Earth had the strength to conquer the galaxy if they chose. What would stop them? Her answer was simple but profound. Humans would be kept in check by the same thing that had always limited them, other humans. Earth had not become a unified dictatorship. They still had debates and disagreements. They still had different cultures and philosophies. They still questioned themselves and each other. More importantly, humanity remembered its history. They knew what happened when power went unchecked. They had fought wars over this exact issue. They had toppled tyrants and opposed empires. These were not just old stories. These were lessons every human child learned. Earth's military followed rules of engagement. Soldiers who violated those rules faced punishment. Leaders who abused authority were removed from power. The system was not perfect. No system was. But it included checks and balances specifically designed to prevent the concentration of power. Chen explained all this to Threnody. Then she added one more thing. The best guarantee against human tyranny was the rest of the galaxy itself. If Earth ever became the monster they had sworn to fight, other species should resist. They should fight back, and humanity would deserve whatever happened to them. Threnody found this answer both reassuring and disturbing. Reassuring because Chen clearly meant it. Disturbing because it suggested humans expected the possibility of their own corruption. They were not naive about their nature. The conversation ended with Threnody making a prediction. The galaxy had entered a new era. Not the era of the Council's peaceful stagnation. Not the era of ancient wars. Something different. A time when rules existed but were enforced. When peace was maintained not through weakness but through strength. Humans called it the Pax Humana. Human peace. Some species embraced it, others tolerated it. A few resisted it, but everyone had to acknowledge it existed. Scholars would debate for generations what the incident with the merchant's hope really meant. Some saw it as humanity revealing their true violent nature. Others saw it as proof that justice required force. Still others saw it as the end of innocence for the galactic community. The truth was probably all of these things and none of them. What mattered was what came after. The galaxy learned that humanity kept promises. When they said they would protect someone, they did. When they said certain actions would have consequences, they followed through. Trust was built on consistency. Years turned into decades. The incident that started everything became history. New generations grew up in a galaxy where humans were simply the strongest species. They did not know what came before. They did not remember the shock of discovering what humanity had hidden, but the older generations remembered. They remembered 3,000 humans dying in what was supposed to be a peaceful galaxy. They remembered warships appearing from nowhere and battles ending in minutes. They remembered trials and justice and consequences. Most of all, they remembered the lesson. Humanity had come to the galaxy in peace. They had followed the rules and played by the book. They had been patient and cooperative. They had wanted nothing more than to belong, but when their people were killed, patience ended. Cooperation became secondary. The rules bent or broke. Because humanity valued justice more than approval, they valued protecting their own more than fitting in. They would rather be feared and respected than liked and ignored. The mistake that changed the galaxy was not really a mistake at all. It was a miscalculation.